on. Hello, folks. Real pleasure to have Robin Gaster, a visiting scholar at George Washington University, and about to release a new book called Behemoths. It's all about Amazon. And we're going to talk a lot about automation today. Robin, thank you for joining me. Spend a couple of minutes describing your background. I know you have a long, long bio.
Well, that's because I'm an old fart, so of course I have a long bio. I'm still here. So I grew up in England. I went to university there. I went to Oxford. And then I came, after a brief period as a professional poker player, I came to America to do a PhD at Berkeley. And then I spent a little time in academia. I spent time as a fellow working for Congress, and then I started a consulting company, and that was about 30 years ago. And since then, I've been doing whatever interesting work I can find for a pretty wide range of clients. Most recently, I spent a long time working for the National Academies of Science and Engineering on innovation projects. Nice. And now I've spent the last couple of years writing this book about Amazon, Behemoth, Amazon Rising, which is a book that tries to look at what I guess I would call the dark and light sides of Amazon. I think Amazon has been an incredible company. Its innovation record is unmatched. It has transformed the world around us, and it's faintly terrifying. I feel that its single-minded and self-admitted obsession with the customer has left a lot of people on the production side paying a fairly heavy price. And that's really not what Amazon is interested in. They're interested in the customer, and they're interested in growing more Amazon. So, that's why it's a complex, it's not like Standard Oil. Everybody hated Standard Oil. They broke it up because everyone hated it. Yep. Everyone loves Amazon. They love what Amazon does to us and for us. But, there's a price to be paid. And I think that as Amazon gets bigger and bigger, the price gets bigger and bigger. So we can certainly talk about that. And we can talk about Amazon's very clear intentions to automate as much as possible and what that means.
Fantastic. It should be a great discussion. Poker player, that wasn't in your bio.
Yeah. I'm still hoping to find a few pigeons here and there. I guess I shouldn't have said anything.
So let's spend a little more time. So what all did you, Amazon's so big, right? So did you focus on the Amazon, the retailer, Amazon Web Services, Amazon, the logistics player? Tell us what dimensions you looked
at. I wrote about all of it. I think it may be the last general book on Amazon because it was almost impossible this time around. And just wait until they're a big player in healthcare and finance and auto sales and whatever else they get into over satellites over the next few years. So I wanted to understand how a tiny company, a tiny online bookseller with 4 or 5 employees could turn into a company with $400 billion in revenues in 25 years. And they didn't do it kind of like Facebook and Google did. Basically, Facebook and Google happened to be squatting over absolute gushers of modern oil information. And they turned it very efficiently into money. But, aside from their core businesses, not much has taken off from them. Google has created Gmail, and they bought YouTube, and there are a couple of other things that they managed to do, but that's about it. It's all very tightly centered around what their core business is. And Facebook is the same. Well, they bought most of their ancillary businesses, like WhatsApp. And Amazon's very different. Look at all the places they've gone and look at the decisions they made. You mentioned logistics. You're old enough to remember, like me, the sort of constant drumming of management opinion that you should focus on your core business and outsource the rest. In 2000, Amazon's core business was selling books. And to think that they would decide under immense pressure, at the time, their logistics system was collapsing. Their software was collapsing and they couldn't get the books out fast enough over the Christmas holidays. They went into meltdown. And, the normal business response to this would be say, pick up the phone, call UPS and say, do our logistics. We'll deliver it to you. You take care of it. Amazon didn't do that. Amazon spent the next 20 years investing billions and billions of dollars in building a world-class logistics system that is now a huge moat around their business.
Yeah.
Not even Walmart can afford to try and compete on a, individual delivery basis. That's a very different and unusual thing to do. So, so I got interested in the notion, okay, well, what's different here? And there are a lot of differences, but I think they managed to figure out how to put different building blocks together to build an accelerating system that where all the different pieces, the customers, the size of the catalog, the logistics, Prime membership, and perhaps above all, the marketplace, which I can talk about for a second, all of those things fit together to accelerate the growth of Amazon's customer base and hence their customers. Marketplace is another extraordinary, weird thing that they did. 1995, 96, no, sorry, 90, 97, 98, something like that. They decided that the best way to run their business was to pretend that they were Macy's and they were going to invite Bloomingdale's in onto the shop floor and say, fine, you sell here too. No problem. Just come right on in, come on in and compete with us. I mean, there are souks all over the world. There have been markets all over the world for 1,000 years. There's never been anything like that. Nobody ever did that. Souks, that owner of the souk is a property owner. They're not in there in the souk trying to compete. They just own the property, take their taxes off, and that's good. So you have to think about how they made these extraordinary decisions and the kind of culture that they built that would allow them to do this. And I found it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, so let's drill down on logistics for a minute. So I think I heard in 2003 or 2004, something called postal injection.
Yeah.
I said, what is that? So Amazon had analyzed their deliveries and basically gone to the US Postal Service and said, instead of you picking up from our locations, why don't we consolidate and deliver to one of your regional locations? And they got a break from that.
Not just that. The goods are pre-sorted by zip code.
Right.
And perhaps even more than zip code, perhaps sub-zip code. And that makes it cheaper for the post office, right?
Right.
Post office doesn't have to run it through sorting. And, the post office's sortation devices are primarily tuned to letters. So doing it for packages is expensive. So they got a pretty good break for doing that. It was a very good idea. It saved everybody money, Amazon in particular, of course, but also the post office. Post office could handle more parcels, on which they're now dependent. Fast
forward 2 years ago, I guess they're not doing this anymore. I went on a tour of one of their distribution centers.
Oh yeah, they're amazing, aren't they?
Just blew my mind. All the robots running around and miles of conveyor belts and everything. Not everything automated, but everything made efficient for the workers, right? So they even measured.
This is a fascinating question. All right, I've been on a couple of those tours, and what's striking is the just relentless efficiency with which workers are prompted to work at maximum pace all the time. I've worked in factories and, you work, but there are breaks and, you talk to people and stuff. This is not like that. I'm sure you went to the I call it a factory. It is a factory. Workers have a screen in front of them, which tells them what to do, of course, and lights and other systems to tell them what to do. But that screen also counts the number of seconds since the last completed action. And those workers in big letters, I could read it, from 10 feet away, 10, 11, 12 seconds. On average, those workers are expected to complete one of those tasks every 12 seconds for 10 hours. Right? Now, that's a level of demand, precision, and monitoring. That's, I know factories monitor workers. Of course they do, but this is, it feels different to me. I don't know. Did it feel different to you?
It did up to a point, but then I look at other industries. I haven't been to any of the Apple's factories in China.
Yeah, right. Well, do you know exactly?
They're fairly demanding,
Yeah,
right?
but
And the difference, I think, is they have a much younger workforce. The one thing I noticed in the Amazon distribution center I went to was they were middle-aged people. And
yeah,
what you're pointing to is something I think we have a societal issue. Our younger workers should be working more in these entry level, what I call entry level blue collar jobs. And they all want to go to college. I mean, before the pandemic, we had 6 million unfilled trade and blue collar jobs, and young people didn't want them. So I think a young person.
I think this is partly geographical. There are blue collar jobs, yes, but are they in the cities where young people want to live? Not so sure. Amazon seems to be able to hire plenty of people, so I'm unclear about whether this is a matching problem or something else. I would want to see more data before I concluded that these were jobs that young people could take and didn't. I mean, it's not as though college has boomed so substantially. We're still only graduating 1/3 of the cohort from 4-year college. 60% of them don't have a bachelor's degree, even today. So it's not like there aren't people without a degree. And in fact, a lot of the people with a degree are working, jobs that don't really need degrees. So I don't think it's a supply side. I think it's a demand side problem. I really don't. I don't think that there are, millions of people who could have taken these jobs and somehow didn't because they went to college. I don't. Sorry, I don't buy it. The numbers don't support it.
I did talk to a couple of employees. Right?
Yeah.
Are you happy with the wage? And they were. I mean, this was in Florida, and they were getting above market. But a couple of them said, "Hey, the college benefits are really lucrative."
Oh, from Amazon, I don't believe it. So here's the story. You have to be there a year, first of all. Most warehouse workers don't last a year. Amazon fires 1/3 of them in the first year, or every year. So that's one thing. Second, most of those benefits are for classes taken while you're still working, right? You have to be working at Amazon. Well, Amazon demands 10-hour days,
Yeah.
extremely physically demanding, plus mandatory overtime. So if Amazon says you've got to work overtime, you work overtime. And whenever they tout their numbers, the number that they assign to people who are taking these courses is 20,000. It is a significant number, but they have 1 million employees, and they don't tell us how many of them complete it. They just tell us how many take it. So I regard those numbers with extreme suspicion. I do not believe that this is I think this is almost entirely PR. I just don't believe it.
But there used to be, it's broken down to some extent. There used to be starter jobs, right?
Yes.
People went to McDonald's when they were young.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Why can't Amazon be a starter 3-4 year job for young people?
For several reasons. Okay. First off, it is so physically demanding. I honestly believe that most people working at Amazon don't last more than a couple of years physically. It's just too physically, the
Even,
work
even,
is,
even if they were 21, 22?
yeah, I think so. I mean, but maybe not. I mean, you could be right. So that's one thing. But the purpose of a starter job is to do two things. It's to signal to employers that you are reliable, right? That you know that you have the soft skills to manage a job. You can get there on time. You can do the work. You can leave. You can not kill people. I mean, you know that's one thing. But the second thing is that you are picking up some skills that are of value, right? Some in workforce skills, and I don't believe you're picking up any at Amazon.
True, true. It's not like going into the Army or Navy or whatever.
Exactly, exactly. So what have you done? Basically, if you go join Amazon when you're 21, you basically put your life on hold for 2 years for a wage that's okay, benefits that are good, healthcare benefits anyway, but you've made no progress at a time where it's critical to make progress in your life.
See, I interviewed some other robotic executives, and they said they're becoming increasingly sensitive to what is attractive to workers, right? And so at least another warehouse automation executive told me, he says, Vinny, there is a certain pride. He cited a lady who um, goes home with pride and tells her child, I get to work with a robot every day. Okay. Now, will that get her a better job? Probably not. But I think employers are becoming sensitive to what you're saying. If there is no value add, why would you kill yourself for 3, 4 years? But good point. Good point. I mean, why would a young person go to work there?
I mean, let me put it this way. If you had a child and you knew the child was not going to go to college, right? They're just not college material. Would you be encouraged if they took a job at Amazon, or would you really hope that they found something better to do?
See, this is where even though I've been in the technology world all my life, white collar, um, I think the country needs a blend. We moved away from trade skills. I mean, the
Oh,
best way.
you get no argument from me about that. Absolutely. So what I would say to your child is find yourself a 9 to 5 job where you can support yourself and you can go to community college and learn a trade of some kind,
Okay.
you know, but you can't do that at Amazon. Amazon's demands are make it impossible. And the rotating shift work makes it almost impossible. So I would stay away because I don't think your child would make any progress.
Well, they don't seem to have a problem hiring. They may not be able to retain, but I don't think they have a problem hiring. So
No, I think this is, well, this is, I mean, this cuts both ways on our discussion, doesn't it? If they can somehow hire 400,000 people last year, which is what they did, well, 400,000 people were delighted to get a job at Amazon. It means there's plenty of supply, right? It's not like,
did you interview some? It'd be interesting to understand why they took the jobs. To
yeah.
your point, it's a very demanding job. You're not learning much new. Why would 400,000
Well,
people?
$15 is a lot better than 11 or 9. You can go work for Walmart for 10 or 11 or something. And also the other thing is these jobs are geographically targeted in a certain way, so they tend to be in areas where the alternatives are limited because not because Amazon is specifically targeting the jobs there, but because Amazon puts warehouses in places that are cheap, and they're cheap because there isn't much going on there. So, it's East Baltimore, right? And it's San Bernardino County, the back end of San Bernardino County, where Amazon is now the biggest employer because it's the cheapest place that's within range of LA. So they were delighted. They were happy to get the jobs, but they also know these jobs are 10 years maximum. they're going to be gone in 10 years. This is the automation part that, and you could, I'm sure, see that in the warehouses you visited. This stuff is all going to be automated.
Well, so as a consumer,
Mm-hmm.
especially during the pandemic,
Yeah.
am I prepared to, if Amazon comes back to me and says, hey, I'll keep hiring more people, but I can't deliver within a day or 2 days or 3 days, is the consumer market going to accept that?
You know, it's really an interesting question because Amazon is, I think, the only one who's going to be able to really deliver within a day. That's what they're aiming for. That's their target. You know, you can go pick up from Walmart
Right.
or Target, yeah, a limited selection of goods. But Amazon is the only one who's really tuned to that. So Amazon is, this is part of a sort of seduction story, right? Amazon is acclimating us to become the demanding consumers that only Amazon can supply, right? Only Amazon can meet the expectations that it has trained us to have.
Well, Shopify is trying in its own way.
It has no distribution. It's Amazon. Shopify is a great idea, and tell me that I'm wrong. Okay, I'm not an expert on Shopify. Shopify seems to me to be an excellent way for existing companies, bricks and mortar companies, to do e-commerce without having to do Amazon. They can reach their own customers through Shopify.
Yep.
It's fine. They don't have to worry too much about delivery. Their customers are probably loyal, etc. But this is a different business than Amazon's.
Yeah, but Shopify does do the distribution. They have their own warehouses. They have their own robots.
No, they have two. They have two. I'm sorry, they don't have distribution. Most of the distribution, I think, is through UPS, but maybe FedEx. I can't remember who they did their deal with. But and now presumably Walmart, because of the deal Walmart has done with them. But they don't have Amazon's network of distribution. They have nothing like it, and they have no prospect of building such a thing.
Well, so what's wrong? And I mean, you know, the argument you hear is they've trampled over and they have run over so many retailers, and now they're gunning for the UPSs and FedEx and so on. My question is, these companies have had 50, 70, 80 years of legacy, right?
Yeah.
How long can we keep protecting them?
Why? Absolutely. And so, you know, do I want to protect Macy's? Absolutely not. I hate shopping in retail stores. I mean, you know, Amazon is wonderful for me. There are a number of pieces to this. So first, is this a fair competition? And the analysis in my book suggests that Amazon, that there is a huge lake of red ink under Amazon retail. And it's filled in from other sources. It's filled in from AWS and Marketplace and Prime and advertising. So effectively, this means that Amazon's prices are predatory, right? It means that they are pricing below cost and they're filling it in with other sources of revenue. So when you're competing with Amazon, you're competing with a very large, extremely well-resourced company that has many advantages already and is prepared to undercut you come what may. That's not that's difficult. So that's one thing. The second thing is Amazon's control of e-commerce platforms. You know, it is the only realistic platform in the US. It's not feasible for it to. I mean, Walmart Plus is not a competitor, and it won't be. So what you have is a monopoly.
But how does the company become a monopoly in 20 years? That's a
they invented a category. They've invented the e-commerce category, which didn't exist before.
But you had
Standard Oil managed it. It took them 25 years or so.
But if you add up all the retailers, if you add up all the logistics players and all that, you probably have $1 trillion in revenue. here's a startup has gone in 20 years and beaten them all up. How can you call that a monopoly? Maybe the
Well,
other
it's not. Well,
sleeping.
just because it's successful doesn't make it not a monopoly. I mean, I'm not saying Amazon is not a monopoly in retail. It is not a monopoly in e-commerce. It is a monopoly platform, right? It's like there are lots of search engines outside Google, but we all use Google, right? And partly that's because Google is best. And partly it's because Google has business practices that tilt us towards using Google. And we understand, the circle is there. So it's the same sort of thing with Amazon. I don't really object to Amazon getting into new businesses. If Amazon was going to be a competitor to FedEx, and it will be kind of partly not, I don't have a big problem with that. If it got into banking, that'd be all right.
Robin, the reason I tend to be a little bit cautious about calling Amazon names is my experience with them is obviously as a consumer.
Yeah.
But also, like you, I've written a few books.
Uh-huh.
And the first 2 books I wrote were with a New York publisher, a big name. And honestly, my experience was horrendous.
Right.
So Amazon comes along with the Kindle platform and their print on demand and so on.
Yep.
And on the Kindle, they pay me 70% royalties. It's like,
That's right.
What?
That's
right. So you have to step back and go, why did the other publishers not do that? And then
it's a great story. I mean, there's a whole chapter in my book about the book business and about why I think, basically Amazon is forcing the unbundling of the book business, right? So instead of having to go through the various gatekeepers, the agent and the publisher and the bookstore, Amazon went around all of that and created a pathway to authors that was completely new. And the result is that when they started, there were about 500,000 new books every year. And this year, there will be 20 million. It's astounding. It's transformed the publishing business completely. The dinosaurs are still there.
Apply that analogy. Weren't the retailers asleep at the wheel?
Oh, absolutely. And it was also, look, it was also transformative, right? I mean, it was transformative in the sense, first of all, nobody understood that Amazon was going to get big quick, right? I mean, the publishers didn't understand it. The booksellers, Borders gave Amazon its online business to run. Talk about a fox and hen house. That was astounding. And so did Toys R Us. So, your point that they were asleep at the wheel is kind of fair. Yes, they were sleepy and slow, and many of them still don't get it. All right. But it was also a sort of shock change that there was an alternative, just like with the publishers, there was an alternative that did not previously exist. And again, it's like given where the world we live in, it was like a virus against which they had no natural defenses. Right? And there they were, suddenly exposed to a new way of selling things. And really, they had no defense.